Your badge is missing." That is the first thing Matthew said, half whispered, half accusation when I passed him in the break room that morning. Matthew was holding his usual stale blueberry muffin like it might file an HR complaint, eyes flicking from the ID lanyard around his neck to the empty spot on mine. I smiled, just a polite, paper-thin smile. Guess it did not fit the new corporate aesthetic. He did not get it. Of course he did not. Nobody really noticed me when I was there. And now that I was gone, the realization was hitting them like a moldy muffin to the face. 4 weeks earlier, I had been sitting quietly at my desk, third row from the window. Next to the emergency defibrillator, nobody knew how to use. Completing Form 483 response drafts for the FDA audit we all knew was coming, but pretended was not. I had gone through this routine more times than I could count. I built the compliance system from scratch back when our office was a converted dentist suite with a single espresso machine and dreams bigger than our payroll. Back when our founders still wore sweatpants and read regulatory guidance like bedtime stories. Back when I mattered. I did not have followers or a curated Slack emoji. I did not sip combat drinks or lead yoga stretches in the hallway. What I did have was a federally registered qualified person designation, the official qualified person for our line of specialty injectables. That meant I was the only warm body legally allowed to approve batch releases. I never bragged about it. Honestly, I barely mentioned it. Why would I? It was my job. It was boring. It was crucial. It was mine. And then came Chloe Bennett with her color-coded brand deck and a voice like everything was a podcast intro. Our new chief marketing officer, fresh from rebranding some wellness startup in Los Angeles that sold medicinal mushrooms in frosted glass jars. She wore confidence like a cape and concern like a sticker she peeled off whenever no one was looking. Day one, she held a culture reset meeting where she asked us to write down our professional spirit animals. I wrote, "Beaver builds regulatory dams, avoids attention, bites when provoked." She said I was not leaning into the playbook. I said I did not have a playbook. She laughed like I had made a joke. That was the beginning of the end. Before we get to how I went from invisible to indispensable, from overlooked to keynote speaker, take a second to subscribe and maybe tap that little thumbs up. I know every story says that, but honestly, it helps the team a lot more than you would think. And unlike Chloe's sorority PowerPoint presentations, this one has got real career-ending consequences. Now, back to the corporate bloodbath. Within a week, Chloe started streamlining departments. Compliance, she said, needed to evolve from a gatekeeper mindset into a permissionless flow state, whatever the hell that meant. I kept my head down, filled out the annual training packets, updated our vendor assurance forms, and noticed her new hire, Scarlett, tagging our lab in social media stories with captions like science, but make it cute, followed by test tube and sparkle emojis. I remember the exact moment I knew I was next. Chloe had gathered us in the conference room with the flickering light bulb, which I had logged 4 times in the facility's maintenance tracker. But sure, let's ignore that. And she said we needed to embrace vibes over vintage. I was vintage. The firing was clinical. No human resources representative, no warning. Just Chloe in her eucalyptus-scented glory, tilting her head like a high-energy marketer and saying, "Daniel, you are incredibly competent, but I just do not think you are a culture fit anymore." I did not argue, did not beg, did not even blink. I stood up, walked out, and left my qualified person badge on the desk right beside the untouched brand handbook she had made us all print out. My 16-year legacy reduced to a lanyard and a laminated lie. What they did not realize, what nobody ever bothered to ask, was that without me, they were not just short-staffed, they were legally non-compliant. The federal regulators do not care about vibes, they care about signatures, my signature. I spent the rest of the day sitting in my truck in the parking lot, listening to the engine tick cool and watching the windows steam with my breath. No one called, no one chased me down. No one understood what had just happened, but the compliance database did. The software was already counting down. The facility had 48 hours to input a new registered qualified person, or every single production line would freeze under Title 21, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 210. They thought they had fired a nuisance. They had actually fired the only person keeping their entire inventory from becoming government-confiscated biohazard. And me? I just went home and waited. The glass partitions made everything visible, and not in a good way. You could see the way people averted their eyes when someone got summoned into that glass fishbowl of a conference room. They would pretend to be buried in emails, or suddenly say interested in the break room's passive, aggressive refrigerator notes. When it was my turn, I saw the signs, the quick glances, the awkward silence. Even Matthew paused mid-pour, like he had caught the scent of trouble. Chloe was already sitting at the head of the conference table, legs crossed like she was auditioning for a startup magazine cover. Behind her was her board filled with nonsense about cultural alignment and disruptive vision. I stepped in, and the door clicked shut behind me. The game was on. She did not waste time. "Daniel, you have been with the company since the early phase trials, right?" She nodded with a smile so sweet I could feel my patience dissolving. "So, you understand how legacy mindsets can sometimes block corporate momentum." I did not flinch. "Is there a specific momentum you feel is blocked?" She sighed like I had just ruined her day. "Look, compliance is important, sure, but we need that department to reflect our brand, and frankly, Daniel, you are not a culture fit. We are pivoting toward agile vibes, flexible, energized, team first." "Team first," I repeated. "By firing the only qualified person who understands the regulations," she blinked. "We brought in Scarlett," she said. "She has a community background. She is a connector, and we need that energy." I thought of the compliance modules I wrote, the personal audit logs, and the tables I updated by hand because the software Chloe optimized did not support our compliance regulations. I thought of explaining clean room gowning to an associate who thought beard nets were optional. I thought of every batch I signed off, every log I checked at 3 in the morning, every microbe I killed so the place could run. And then I realized this woman has no clue what I actually do. None of them did. Chloe leaned forward. "Do not take this personally, okay? We just need to evolve beyond outdated gatekeeping and lean into modern transformation." I could have said a lot. I could have asked if Scarlett even knew what a validation master plan was. I could have asked if she understood sterile fill-finish environments, or if she thought media testing meant updating social media. I could have quoted exact clauses from federal guidelines and asked if her new hire could even spell aseptic. Instead, I just stood up, unclipped my badge, slid out the qualified person credential with the official registration code, and placed it on the table with deliberate precision. I did not slam it down. I did not give a big speech. I just left it there like a ticking clock, quiet and final. Chloe's eyes flicked to it, but she did not register the weight. "Thanks for your understanding," she said, already opening her laptop. I walked out. The door clicked behind me. This time, it sounded like a vault door locking. By the time I passed the hallway with the posters about transparency and community, I felt lighter. Not free, not yet, but lighter. Outside, the morning sun hit my windshield, blinding me for a second. I sat in the driver's seat and let the truck idle. Inside that building, they were already briefing Scarlett on how to smile through audits and build relationships with regulators. She was probably picking out a company hashtag and ordering customized lab coats. No one knew that the badge I left behind was not a formality, it was the license. Without it, no batch could be approved. Without it, every dose they manufactured after 8:15 in the morning when I dropped it on the table was legally unsellable. I was not their culture fit, but I had been their safety net, and they just removed it for a brand reset. I spent the afternoon wrapping my 16 years of work into cardboard boxes, 4 boxes to be exact, one for books no one ever borrowed, one for federal compliance binders I had annotated with sticky notes so thick they looked like a paper forest, one for the little desk plant that somehow survived under fluorescent lights and corporate neglect, and one for the mug with the faded molecular structure and the backup phone charger I lent out but never got back. I did not say goodbye, not because I did not care, but because I cared too much. I knew if I stopped to make eye contact with Matthew or look back at the lab, I would hesitate. So I walked out like a ghost, clocking its own time of departure. The next morning, I logged into my old personal backup email out of habit. The corporate account had been locked before I even reached the highway, but this backup still received automated system alerts and Slack digests. Most of it was noise, but one message stood out. It was from Matthew, sent at 9:30 in the morning, an hour after I left. The subject was simple: Quick question about permissions. I did not open it. Not yet. Meanwhile, I checked LinkedIn. Chloe had already updated her profile with a headshot that looked like a corporate influencer. Her new headline read, "Driving Growth Through Authenticity and Regulatory Synergy." Below that, she had tagged Scarlett, welcoming the new compliance director. Scarlett was smiling in a photo in the lab, no gloves, no goggles, hair flowing, and a caption about girl power with martini emojis. My stomach turned not from jealousy but from dread. They had handed the keys to someone who thought sterile environments were a lighting preference. And they were proud of it. Matthew's second message came through just after noon. He wrote that they were seeing something strange on the batch review portal and could not clear the previous day's releases without a qualified person's signature. There was just a blank field where my login used to be. I closed the email and did not reply. They had access to the federal databases. Let them search for a solution. That night, I cooked dinner in silence, tearing basil leaves from the little desk plant now sitting on my kitchen windowsill. I sipped red wine that did not taste like victory yet, just a quiet pause. The truth was, I did not want drama. I just wanted my work to be respected. But they chose arrogance over compliance. The next morning, another email arrived. Matthew copied Human Resources and Legal, asking if I was available for a consulting call. I ignored it. Silence is much louder than shouting when the paperwork is airtight. The first week after my departure, the company carried on as if nothing had changed. The laboratory staff shuffled around in their clean rooms, and Chloe held an all-hands meeting where everyone had to write poems about innovation on sticky notes. Matthew sent me a text message with a photo of his workstation and a sarcastic note about the free muffins they got. But behind the scenes, the cracks were widening. I still had access to the raw material supplier dashboard because they forgot to remove my personal credentials. Typical oversight. I watched lot codes get issued, shipping windows open, and new batch IDs enter the system. Then came batch number 4478. It was the first batch manufactured after my exit, and it immediately triggered a calibration error on the primary filling line. Normally, such an error is routed to the qualified person for validation and release. But the system found no registered qualified person on file. The software did exactly what I had programmed it to do. It locked the batch, refused to proceed, and flashed a bright red banner across every screen in the facility. No valid qualified person credentials detected. Manufacturing suspended under Title 21. Matthew tried to override the block using his supervisor login, but the system denied him. He called the technology department and they said they would look into it. 2 hours passed. He escalated the issue to Human Resources, who brought in Scarlett. Scarlett walked into the clean room area, holding a tablet and a gourmet coffee. When Matthew explained the lock, she said, "Oh, just bypass the system. It is probably just a glitch from these old settings." Matthew stared at her, dumbfounded. Bypassing a regulatory lock was not just against policy, it was a federal violation. The software is locked for a reason. A missing qualified person is not a glitch, it is a legal block. But Scarlett did not understand, and neither did Chloe. When Chloe was looped in, she sent a message telling operations to keep the line moving and log it as a temporary workflow delay, promising to handle it during the next routine audit. The next audit. I stared at my screen at home, watching Matthew's messages grow more frantic. He sent a message to the legal team, asking if they could be held personally liable for releasing products without an active qualified person. I took a screenshot of that message for my own records. The lines kept running, but the foundation was gone. They were building on sand and the tide was coming in, and that was when Chloe made her fatal mistake. Frustrated by the system block and refusing to let production stall, she ordered Scarlett to find a way around it. Scarlett, completely out of her depth but eager to please her boss, went into the system administration panel. She found my inactive employee profile, which still held my federal qualified person registration code. Using an administrator override password she had coaxed from a junior IT technician, Scarlett changed the email address on my old account to her own and attempted to log in as me to authorize the batch release. She forged my digital signature, attaching my official credentials to the release documents for batch 4478. She did not realize that the system logs every single change, including the IP address of the terminal used for the modification. By using my credentials without my consent and signing my name on a federal compliance document, she had committed forgery. This was not just a corporate shortcut, it was a direct violation of California Penal Code Section 470. Under the law, any contract or authorization signed under forged credentials is void ab initio, completely invalid from the very beginning. More importantly, it is a federal crime to submit forged records to the Food and Drug Administration. Matthew saw the log change in real time. Horrified, he took a screenshot of the audit trail showing Scarlett's user ID, modifying my qualified person profile, and using it to sign off on the batches. He immediately forwarded the screenshot to my personal email with a message that read, "They just forged your signature to release the line. What do I do?" I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. This was no longer just a case of corporate incompetence. This was a felony. I had my destroyer weapon. The system did not stay silent for long. At exactly 7:45 the next morning, the main terminal screens across the entire facility shifted from red warning bars to a complete system lockdown. The software had run its automated daily check against the Federal Registry and detected that the qualified person credentials being used did not match any active employee on the company's payroll database. The override attempt had triggered an automatic security freeze. Every machine on the floor stopped. The air filtration units hummed, but the filling lines were dead. Matthew told me later that the silence was deafening. The clean room technician stood around, staring at screens that read, "Security alert. Unregistered credentials detected. All manufacturing operations suspended." The facility had failed to resolve the lack of a qualified person within the 48-hour window, and now the system had locked them out completely. The floor supervisors did not know what to do. One of the senior laboratory technicians came up to Matthew and asked if they should purge the line or leave the product in the holding tanks. If they purged the lines, they would lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in active ingredients. If they left it, the product would degrade and become unusable anyway. It was a choice between immediate loss or eventual disposal, and neither option was acceptable. Matthew could only tell them to wait for orders from the executive floor, but no orders came. The communication breakdown was complete. Matthew bolted to the executive suite. He found Chloe in the break room, filming a video for the company's social media about work-life balance. When he showed her the screen on his phone, she looked annoyed and asked if they could discuss it after she finished her recording. Matthew told her flatly that the entire facility was shut down and every batch produced since my departure was now legally flagged as adulterated. Chloe blinked, asking if they could just hire a replacement for me by the afternoon. Matthew looked at her as if she had lost her mind, explaining that registering a new qualified person with the regulators takes months, not hours. Meanwhile, I was at the grocery store, choosing olive oil and ignoring my buzzing phone. I had calls from Chloe, from the human resources manager, and even from the office of the chief executive officer, Nicholas Grayson. I turned my phone off and went home. The company was now facing a catastrophe of their own making. By 10:45 that morning, the warehouse team had compiled a report on the blocked inventory. They had 10 days of production, totaling 20 full-scale lots, sitting in the storage vaults. That was $105 million in inventory that could not be moved, sold, or even shipped. Without a valid qualified person signature, it was just expensive liquid. And because Scarlett had forged my signature on the initial release forms, those lots were legally tainted. Under the law, the forgery made the releases void ab initio. The company had technically distributed unapproved medical products, which is a federal crime. Matthew BCC'd me on the emails sent to the legal team. The lawyers were panicking. They knew that if the regulators discovered the forged signatures, the company would face immediate shutdown and criminal prosecution. The chief executive officer, Nicholas Grayson, finally stepped in. He called an emergency meeting in the glass fishbowl. Chloe tried to paint it as a minor technical issue, but Matthew laid out the facts. He showed the CEO the audit trail of the forged signature and the system lockdown. The CEO turned pale. He asked Chloe who their registered qualified person was, and she lied, saying they were onboarding someone immediately. But the investors were already calling. They wanted to know why the shipping schedules had frozen and why the regulatory portal was showing errors. One investor, an experienced industry veteran, asked Chloe directly for the name of the active qualified person on file. She could not answer. The call ended in disaster. The company's general counsel spent the afternoon in his office, with the door locked, reviewing the federal statutes. He knew they were trapped. If they reported the issue honestly, the FDA would shut them down. If they hid it, they were committing ongoing fraud. He advised the CEO that every single vial of the $105 million in inventory was a potential lawsuit. Nicholas Grayson, who had spent his career managing investor relations and public statements, had no idea how to handle a real regulatory crisis. He had trusted Chloe's marketing strategies and her plans for a modern compliance system. Now he was looking at the ruin of his company. The board of directors was notified, and they scheduled an emergency meeting for the following morning. The board members, who were used to seeing steady profit margins and smooth operations, were furious. One of the major investors, a venture capital firm that had put $40 million into the latest expansion, demanded to know how a single personnel decision could halt the entire operation. They wanted to know why the legal department had not flagged this risk before the CMO made her moves. The general counsel could only explain that compliance had been treated as an administrative detail rather than a core operational requirement. Chloe was desperately searching for a consultant who could sign off on the batches, but every compliance expert they contacted refused to touch the facility once they heard there was no registered qualified person. The system had done its job. It protected the public from unverified products, and it had left the executives holding a massive bill for their own arrogance. I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset, knowing that the trap they had built for themselves was about to spring shut. Chloe Bennett was fired on a Friday morning. There was no announcement, no farewell party, just a sudden meeting in the boardroom and the sound of her heels walking down the corridor for the last time. She left behind her marketing books, her diffuser, and her corporate values posters. The company sent out a brief email stating she had left to pursue other opportunities. She was replaced by Valerie Jenkins, one of her former assistants, who had once told me I should smile more instead of worrying about sterility guidelines. The irony was not lost on me. That afternoon, Valerie sent me 3 emails and left a voicemail. Her tone was completely different now. She was polite, professional, and desperate. She asked if I would be open to a consulting role, offering a generous hourly rate just to review their systems and help them resolve the lockout. I did not reply. I was not going to help them cover up a crime. Instead, I took the screenshots Matthew had sent me and drafted a formal report. I sent it to the regional office of the Food and Drug Administration and the State Attorney General's office. I detailed the unauthorized use of my credentials and the forgery of my digital signature on the batch release forms, citing California Penal Code Section 470. I explained that the releases were void ab initio and that the company had distributed unapproved drugs. The response was immediate. Within 3 days, the regulators issued a formal warning letter and announced an unannounced site inspection. When the inspectors arrived, they did not waste time with pleasantries. They went straight to the IT department and demanded the system access logs. When they compared the timestamp of the batch releases with my termination date, the discrepancy was obvious. Then they looked at the digital signature. It had my name, but the IP address traced back to Scarlett's desk on the executive floor. Under questioning, Scarlett broke down. She admitted she did not know the password was an administrator override and that she had simply done what Chloe told her to do. Chloe, of course, tried to deny any involvement, but the digital trail was clear. The general counsel advised the board that they were looking at criminal charges for submitting false statements to a federal agency. The state attorney general also opened an investigation into the forgery of my credentials. The company was ordered to halt all shipments and recall every batch produced since my departure. The company was facing a consent decree, a legal document that would place their entire manufacturing operation under the supervision of a court-appointed monitor for years. It was a death sentence for their growth plans. The news hit the industry like a bomb. The $105 million in inventory was officially declared waste. The company's stock price plummeted, and several major distributors canceled their contracts. Nicholas Grayson was forced to step down as CEO, and the board faced shareholder lawsuits for breach of fiduciary duty. Meanwhile, my phone was ringing with job offers from competitors who had heard about the situation. I received 7 concrete offers for director-level roles with full authority over compliance operations and significant equity. They did not want someone who would smile and ignore the rules. They wanted a firewall. I accepted a position with a firm that respected my expertise and paid me double my old salary. My transition to the new firm was seamless. The executives at my new company understood that compliance was not a barrier to progress. It was the foundation of safety. They gave me a team of 4 experienced compliance officers and the budget to build a modern, fully redundant tracking system. We did not have culture reset meetings or write down our spirit animals. We focused on keeping the clean rooms sterile and the records accurate. My salary was double what I had made at my old job, and I had a seat at the executive table. When I walked through the new facility, I wore my badge with pride, knowing that my work was valued. A few months later, I was invited to speak at an industry conference in New York. My presentation was titled, "The True Cost of Ignoring Compliance." The room was packed with executives and quality assurance professionals. During my talk, I explained how the system is designed to fail safely and how ego can destroy the essential protections of a company. 15 minutes into my presentation, I noticed Nicholas Grayson sitting in the very back row. He looked exhausted, older, and completely defeated. He had no entourage, no green juice, and no badge. I did not stop speaking. I did not call him out. This was my moment, and he had no part in it. I finished my presentation to loud applause, and when I looked back, he was gone. He did not try to speak to me, and I did not need his words. The system had functioned exactly as I designed it. It had recognized that I was gone, and it had shut them down. All I had to do was walk away. You are the real heroes of the workplace. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel and keep your systems secure.